Okay, so we know there's only one passage left. We know it's natural science. We know it's not going to have a graph, and it's the paired passage. So the nice thing is natural science is sometimes more fun to read than global conversation, but still, this is one of the reasons we tell y'all to make sure that you're finding the order of the passages and where the graphs and where the pairs are before you start. Because think of what would happen if you were exhausted, you were running out of time, and you're up against a paired passage. You can eject cord this. I mean, you could if you absolutely had to, but it's not going to be nearly as beneficial to you as saving a graph passage for the end and eject cording it. Because this is paired, it might take you a little bit longer. So if you're at the end and you only have 9 minutes left, it's a little bit of a scary moment. So we know it's paired, so they're going to be like two different ideas concerning the same topic because it is natural science. Its job is to inform. So remember, if it's paired in its global conversation, they're going to be very argumentative. But if it's natural science and paired, they're going to be looking at a similar issue from two different sides, or one piece may be new information about something from the first piece. We always want to read this information first because it might tell us that relationship. So passage 1 is adapted from this article called The Carnivore Way, Coexisting with and Conserving North America's Predators. So coexistence, predators, carnivores. Written in 2014. Passage 2 is from this article, Missing Links. Ooh, that's kind of punny. And Trophic Cascades in Food Webs. So food webs, predators, I can kind of see the relationship here. And it's a reply to Ripple et al. So this was written in 2012 by the Wildlife Society. So it looks like they both may be responding to like a similar person. A trophic cascade, so not because it's just like a little definition. A trophic cascade occurs when the presence of a predator decreases the population of its prey, thereby increasing the number of organisms at the next lower. So if predators are up, prey is down, but then whatever that prey might eat is going to have a population increase as well because they have fewer predators. So I think that's kind of the relationship that we may be looking at. Let's go ahead and start diagnosing some questions. Remember, paired passages we're going to do effectively separately. So as soon as we see a reference to passage 2 or line 49, we know that we can stop there and read passage 1. All right, so a function, purpose function of the first paragraph. So let's go ahead and bracket the first paragraph. It looks like it's a little bit of a long one. As used in line 16, word in context. We're going to go to line 16 and the word drive. Passage 1 indicates, so that is a content and characterization question. It has a COE, but it's not a COE follow-up. This is a COE standalone. So we need to figure out what this one is asking. Ripple and his colleagues would expect to find that in areas where wolves have returned, elk and deer. Okay, so it looks like wolves have returned. What happens to elk and deer? So kind of like, what is this effect? I wonder if it's going to be similar to this note we already took on the trophic cascade, but let's see. We have a COE follow-up. Oh, but this is about passage 2, so you know what? We can stop here. We don't need to read any further. All right, so we're looking for the effect that wolves might have on elk and deer population once the wolves have returned. In the early 2000s, wolves began to drift down from Canada and across the border from Idaho into Washington state. This natural wolf recolonization inspired ecologists such as William Ripple and his colleagues to conduct an exercise in scientific thinking to consider potential impacts that an apex predator like the wolf would have on the intricate workings of the lynx snowshoe hare food web. Okay, so lynx are like those big cats, so I'm guessing the lynx eat the snowshoe hares. And that's part of the food web. So the hares are eaten by the lynx might be eaten by the wolves. At the time, Washington had low hare and lynx populations and a high coyote problem. Okay, so maybe coyotes are eating both the lynx and the snowshoe hare. So we have a high coyote problem and a low lynx and hare population because the coyotes are eating them. Coyotes had recently expanded their range and abundance there. Wolves prey on coyotes. Okay, so that's our relationship, this like increase, decrease, increase. What if the wolves' return to the Pacific Northwest could indirectly improve lynx conservation via trophic cascades? So the wolves eat the coyotes, and therefore there are less coyotes to eat the lynx and the snowshoe hares. Therefore, that population rises. Ripple and colleagues hypothesized that two mechanisms would blank wolf, coyote, lynx, snowshoe trophic cascades. So I think that's like influence or cause. I'm going to put cause. But I'm also going to put influence because I kind of feel like it's a word in between those two. First, by killing coyotes, wolves would reverse the mesopredator release that had occurred when wolves had been extirpated from this region nearly a century earlier. That's a lot of words. Mesopredator and extirpated, like that's a lot of words I don't know. But by killing coyotes, wolves would reverse something that happened when the wolves had gone away. When humans hunted wolves to extinction, they removed an important check on coyote numbers, creating a release on the number of this mid-sized predator. Coyote numbers increase, which put more pressure on lynx via competition for food. Oh, okay, so the lynx do eat the hares, but then the coyotes are stronger and they can eat more. Therefore, by reducing coyotes in the system, a returning wolf population could indirectly create ecological benefits for the lynx. The researchers further hypothesized that because coyotes also prey on lynx, a reduction of coyote numbers by wolves would release predation pressure on lynx. So not only are their lynx not getting killed by coyotes, their food source is not getting killed by coyotes. So it's like a win-win for the lynx. Second, in western North America, south of the U.S.-Canada border, wolves prey primarily on elk and deer. Okay, I know there's a question about this. When elk and deer numbers are high, these herbivores can suppress shrubs via heavy browsing. Ripple and colleagues hypothesized that the wolf's return would reduce elk and deer numbers and also change their behaviors. So reducing numbers, changing behaviors, as has been found in places like Yellowstone. Elk and deer need to stay alert in order to survive in these areas where wolves exist. This means keeping their heads up and spending less time standing in one spot with their heads down, as they typically do when there are no wolves in the system. Okay, so all of that is the effect that wolves are going to have on deer and elk. Okay, so they have to be more alert. We're going to lower the numbers, and therefore the shrubs can come back. Via this predation risk mechanism, wolves could indirectly reduce browsing pressure on shrubs, which would improve snowshoe hare habitat, therefore benefiting lynx. So man, the lynx are like getting hit 3 times with benefits. That's amazing. Okay, the important function of the first paragraph of the passage. So this is where we learn that the wolves are coming back and that we think that there might be an impact on this food web, this lynx snowshoe hare food web. So assert the strength of the assumption that informed the hypothesis that Ripple and his colleagues developed. All right, maybe that doesn't seem untrue, but I don't necessarily see... They're making an assertion, but not necessarily a full hypothesis. Let's see. Describe the ecological situation that Ripple and his colleagues considered. That seems more accurate. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of A. Define important concepts that Ripple and his colleagues employed in their research. No, we're just talking about the trophic cascades. Compare behavioral traits of the animals that Ripple and his colleagues studied. So we don't really talk about like the different predation or how they behave specifically. It's just kind of a big, if wolves come back, here's what happens. So B is the correct answer for 43. All right, so for the word drive, we came up with cause or influence. And look, cause is right here. Let's disprove everything else. Convey means to show or to put forward. Operate means to not necessarily cause, but be the performer behind a situation, perhaps. So we can get rid of that one. And then repulse would be more like if it was driving it away. So A is the correct answer. 45. When wolves come back, what happens to deer and elk? So we saw a few things. They have to stay more alert. Their behaviors change. They might, become predators as well. So they feed on fewer varieties of shrubs than do elk and deer in areas where no wolves. So I don't think it's about the variety. The reason the shrubs are going to come back is because there might be fewer deer and elk to eat them after all the predation happens. So I think we can get rid of A. They might exist in lower numbers than they did prior to the local extermination of wolves. Well, maybe, but it's not that they're existing in lower numbers. So I don't know that I like this. I'm not going to completely get rid of it. They might graze for shorter periods without interruption than they did before the return of wolves. That comes directly from the passage. I can point to a line of evidence that says that, keeping their heads up and spending less time standing in one place, as they typically do when no wolves are in a system. So this comes right after they discuss the change in behavior, such as grazing. Demonstrate less fearful behavior towards coyotes than towards wolves. Coyotes aren't discussed right here. It's just the connection between wolves and elk and deer. So C is the correct answer. All right. So overall, we know that if wolves come back, they're going to affect that trophic cascade, because not only will they prey on coyotes, which will help alleviate the lynx population, it's also going to help improve the snowshoe hare population, which benefits the lynx. And they might keep the deer and elk from overgrazing the shrubs that the snowshoe hares live in, thus benefiting the snowshoe hares and indirectly the lynx. All right, so overall, it's the effect on the trophic cascade that wolves would have. So 46 is going to be for passage 2. It's a COE. We don't need to worry about anything that it asks yet. The authors of passage 2 provide information about this rate, most likely too. So this is kind of a why do they provide this? So this feels a little bit like maybe a purpose function question. Like, why do they provide this information? In line 81, the authors use this word, most likely to. So again, it's not asking what the phrase means. It's kind of a purpose function about a specific line. So let's look at 81. And I'm going to circle the word shared because it's kind of this like word in context purpose function hybrid. I need to know what shared is doing, but it's why are we using this word? What is it indicating? Okay, number 49 is asking about the relationship. So we know that's a main idea, primary purpose, but we also know it's about both passages. So we can actually stop here. Okay, so we have a COE. We need to look at information about mortality rates. I'm going to go ahead and box this. And northwestern Montana. So when I see that, I know there's going to be an answer there. In line 81, so I know that we're going to stop and talk about that one as well. Okay, Ripple et al. Correctly state that wolves can affect coyotes both behaviorally and ecologically in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, as shown by Berger and Geese, and that such regulation can have cascading effects. So that's that trophic cascade. So that's mentioned in both passages. However, despite the well-publicized initial declines in coyote abundance in the GYE following wolf recovery, coyotes may now be adapting to wolves, and coyote pack numbers may have rebounded. So we're seeing another increase in coyote population. The trophic strength of wolf effects on coyotes may also differ geographically with variation in climate, primary productivity, and carnivore and prey communities, and the degree of human persecution. The inverse relationship between wolves and coyotes in Yellowstone is not supported outside the two national parks, Yellowstone and Grand Teton, including the analysis by Berger and Giese. In other systems where wolves, coyotes, and lynx coexist, research shows a positive relationship between wolves and coyotes, whereby coyotes benefit from scavenging on wolf-killed ungulate carcasses. The generally low mortality rates of radio-collared coyotes killed by wolves outside of Yellowstone in northwest Montana. Okay, didn't we have something about a mortality rate in northwest Montana? We did. Let's mark that. Is 3 times less than those killed by cougars. Thus, this quick review of the literature suggests that the strongest generality of Ripple et al.'s hypothesis that wolves have a direct negative effect on coyotes is at best inconsistent. So this mortality rate is showing us that their hypothesis is inconsistent. Buskirk et al. Hypothesized that coyotes compete with lynx through both interference competition, direct killing or displacement, and indirect exploitative competition for mutual food resources. So not only do they affect them by competing killing the lynx or displacing them, they also indirectly affect them because they share a food source, and the coyotes are doing a better job at eating that food source, I guess. Ruppel et al. Speculated that these interactions are, in part, responsible for the imperiled status of southern lynx. Unfortunately, evidence for interference competition is essentially limited to anecdotal observations. An observation of a single juvenile lynx killed by a coyote in the Yukon is not prima facie, at first sight, evidence, so we can't just look at that as evidence for a trophic level interaction. Further, in this northern population, more predation mortality of radio-collared lynx was attributed to wolves, wolverines, and other lynx than to coyotes. Direct interactions between coyotes and lynx were rare. Okay, so which choice from the passage 2 best supports the idea that findings about the effect of wolves on coyotes in some locations may not be representative of the effects of wolves on coyotes in all locations? I feel like we read that kind of around, we did mark, this idea of inconsistent. Let's see if that's an option. 75. So not quite, but let's see what we can find. 49 through 53. 1, 2, 3. Okay, Ruppel et al. Correctly states that wolves can affect coyotes both behaviorally and ecologically in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, as shown by Berger and Giese, and that such regulations can have cascading effects. Okay, so that makes it sound like it is true and it is representative, and we're looking for something that says that it is not representative. 53 through 57. However, despite the well-publicized initial declines in coyote abundance in the GYE following wolf recovery, coyotes may now be adapting to wolves and coyote pack numbers may have rebounded. So this is still in the GYE, and so we can't say whether or not it is or is not representative of other areas, and that's what we're looking. We're looking to see that it's not representative of all areas and all locations. 61 through 64 says the inverse relationship between wolves and coyotes in Yellowstone is not supported outside these two national parks, included in the analysis by Berger and Giese. So it's not supported in anywhere else. So that could be the answer. 78 through 81 says, Buskirk et al. Hypothesized that coyotes compete with lynx through both interference. Okay, so this is no longer about information in one area versus another. So C must be the correct answer. 47, why do we include information about the mortality rates in northwest Montana? So we learned here that these generally low mortality rates is 3 times less than those killed by cougars. So we're seeing that coyotes are not killed by wolves as often as they are killed by coyotes, or by cougars, sorry. So offering an alternative explanation for coyote decline in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. Maybe we do learn about like another predator, the cougar, but I don't know that it's discussing the decline in the ecosystem, because it just says that more of them happen to be killed by this than that, but we don't see the pack rate going down. So maybe not. Emphasize the strength of the wolf-caused trophic cascade. No, because it clearly said that the cougars are killing more than the wolves. Illustrate the claim that the presence of wolves can indirectly benefit coyotes. Well, they're still killing them, just not as much as the cougars are killing them. So C is incorrect. Support the claim that wolves may not always pose a major direct threat to coyotes. Well, that seems like it works, because it says here, let's read it again. Right above it, it even says coyotes benefit from scavenging on wolf-killed undulated carcasses, and the generally low mortality rates of radio collar killed by wolves is 3 times less than those killed by cougars. So it looks like D is the correct answer, because we don't get anything about the coyote decline. It's just that one species is killing them more often than the other. Okay, in line 81, the use of the word shared shows that the coyote and lynx have like a mutual food resource, so they're eating the same thing, which looks like a direct iteration of A. They're not eating together, they're just eating the same thing. They're not both preyed on wolves because we're looking for food resources, not them being food. And it's not stealing food from one another, it's that they are both hunting the same thing. All right, so that's all of passage 2. So passage 2 is making it sound like wolves don't have as much of an effect on the cascade as passage 1 suggested they did. Which choice best describes the relationship between the passages? So passage 2 presents information that challenges aspects of the hypothesis described. That might work because they're showing that wolves don't have as big of an impact. Passage 2 casts doubt on the authenticity of the data. First of all, we don't really see data, and passage 2 isn't saying that they have fake data or poorly established data. This kind of would be a suggestion that the piece in passage 1 is a lie. So that is incorrect. Passage 2 argues for the need for modifications to the hypothesis. They're not saying you need to change what you're thinking. They're just saying, hey, here are some things that we noticed that don't necessarily back it up. Passage 2 discusses a study intended to test parts. We don't ever see a study that's intended to test parts. We're just saying like, hey, this is what we're noticing in the trophic cascades. So A is the correct answer. All right, number 50. Based on the passage, Ripple and his colleagues and the authors of passage 2 would most likely agree with which statement? So this is an inference question. Remember, all of these are synthesis questions because they're about both passages, but we still want to identify what type of question they are. This one does not have a COE follow-up, so we're looking for what they would most likely agree with about wolves and coyotes. All right, wolves and coyotes typically occupy the same trophic level in an ecosystem. Well, we know that's not true because the wolves were referred to as apex predators, and the wolves eat the coyotes. So even though they both eat lynx, wolves are still above coyotes. It is possible for wolves to initiate trophic cascades through their effects on coyotes. Both of these articles did talk about trophic cascades, both Article 1 and Article 2, so this could be our correct answer. There are some circumstances in which the presence of wolves may benefit coyotes. That was only talked about in passage 2, where we said that coyotes could scavenge the carcasses of the wolves' meals. So C is incorrect. Wolves and coyotes can have both ecological and behavioral effects on large herbivores. The large herbivores were really only mentioned in passage 1 clearly. The only time they came up in passage 2 is I think those are the ungulate carcasses that the coyotes are stealing from the wolves, but the coyotes did not have a direct effect on that, so D is incorrect, leaving us with B. Okay, the authors of passage 2 suggest that the hypothesis described in line 28 through 32 is something. So this is an inference and suggestion. I always check for a COE follow-up. It does have one. I've already read these passages, so it's fine to go ahead and continue this question. I need to read this chunk to see what this hypothesis is, so let's start there. 28 through 32. 6, 7, 8. Okay. The researchers further hypothesized that because coyotes also prey on a lynx, a reduction of coyote numbers by wolves would release predation pressure on lynx. All right, so I think passage 2 ended up kind of disproving that, but let's see what we can find. So passage 2 suggests the hypothesis described in this. So we need to see this, we need to find a line that discusses the wolf affecting the coyote in a negative way in order to improve the lynx population. So lines 65 through 68. In other systems where wolves, coyotes, and lynx coexist, research shows a positive relationship between wolves and coyotes, whereby coyotes benefit from scavenging on wolf-killed ungulate carcasses. Okay, that doesn't include the lynx, so I'm going to say no lynx. This can't be the correct answer. 69 through 72. The generally low mortality rates of radio-collared coyotes killed by wolves is 3 times less likely than those killed by cougars. So again, this does not discuss lynx. So it can't be our correct answer. No lynx. 82 through 84. Look, it says lynx. That's a good sign. All right, so Ripple et al. Speculated that these interactions are, in part, responsible for the imperiled status of southern lynx. Okay, these interactions, what are the interactions? We have to go above that to read. Hypothesize that coyotes compete with lynx through both interference and indirect exploitative competition for shared food sources. Okay, maybe. It does reference lynx, so let's hold on to it. I don't really see any interaction with wolves, though, so is that could be a problem. 86 through 88. An observation of a single juvenile lynx killed by a coyote in the Yukon is not prima facie evidence for a trophic level interaction. Is that as far as that one went? To 88. Yep. Okay, the trophic level interaction, though, at least alludes to the wolves, and we do have coyotes and lynx, so I think that is going to be our correct answer, because it at least alludes to the relationship with the wolf, and C does not. Okay, so the research saying that the trophic level interaction caused by the wolves, and this one is saying that it is not at first sight evidence for that. So it's not contradicted because it does show it, but it's saying that it's not enough evidence. Valid for many populations, but not for all. I think this is taken from earlier in the passage when we talked about it working in the greater Yellowstone, but not necessarily in the Yukon, so we'll get rid of that one. Difficult to test in the natural setting. It's not necessarily about a test, it's just an observation. But they are saying that that is insufficient data, that one experience is not enough to show that. So D is the correct answer. All right, guys, so we are done with the reading section of March 2020. We'll be back with separate videos for the writing section.